Hi everyone, welcome to my channel, That Carnivore Life. I'm Emily and I'm your host for today. There have been a number of new people who have subscribed this week. I want to say hi and thank you. If you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe to my channel and select the bell notification so that you're notified of future uploads. If you love my accent or anything else in this video, please hit the like button and feel free to leave any comments or thoughts below in the comments section of this video. In today's video, I'm talking about cravings. What do we do as a carnivore or as somebody who's trying to eat a better diet? What do we do when cravings hit? I'm actually going to use the word triggered instead of cravings from this moment on. Firstly, why am I talking so much about this and not about meat in this episode? I believe that it's vital to heal our entire selves. That means our body, our mind, and our spirit. And as much as I would like it, we cannot do that solely with food. What we feed our body has a really big impact, but that is still only a part of the picture, not the whole picture. Before we move on, I'd like to again clarify, as I have in my previous videos, I am not medically trained. Everything that I'm sharing with you is from my own journey of health over the last 12 years. It comes from my conversations with many medical professionals and my own personal research. It's on the job training. I'm sharing this because it's been helpful for me, but it's taken me 12 years to get to where I am today. I don't want that for somebody else. If it can be done in 10 days or 12 days for somebody else, that's way better than 12 years. And so I hope that through sharing my experiences and my story, that you or a loved one would find help as a result, and you would not have to deal with 12 years of frustrations. First, let's consider what is a trigger. A trigger is something that launches an effect. You would have heard of pull the trigger. Nothing is going to happen until you pull that trigger. In the carnivore space, there's a few triggers I've identified thus far. One is physical food addiction, where we are so addicted to the taste or the texture of food or the food itself that the moment it touches our lips, that we think about eating it, it brings a type of euphoria. Most people know of a food addiction. Most people know somebody with a food addiction. We can be triggered and then we end up eating a block of chocolate. Another trigger is an emotional food addiction. Maybe we don't have a physical food addiction, but maybe we have an emotional food addiction. This would be where an emotion arises, so an emotion is triggered, and we go to food to meet that emotional trigger. We may not even care for the food. It may not even do anything for us when we're eating it, but the emotion that came up wanted that food. These triggers may stem from trauma. They may not. It may just be a learned behavior that's become an addiction, or simply just a learned behavior that's getting triggered. It does not have to stem from trauma. What does this look like for me personally? For many, many years, I have certainly had a physical food addiction. I've been addicted to the tastes and the textures of food. However, I've been carnivore now, essentially carnivore, for 2 years, almost 2 years. It'll be 2 years in June. What I've noticed is I would crave something like sugary or carby and I would eat it and I wasn't even enjoying it. And I wondered what was going on. Then I heard another fellow carnivore in a YouTube recently, and she was talking about the moment she realized, oh, I don't have a food addiction anymore. There's an emotional addiction here. And I realized in that moment of eating this sugary, carby snack that I wasn't enjoying it and I wasn't attracted to the food. When I thought about it that morning, there were all these emotions going on. I had been triggered in the morning and my body, as a result of that trigger, wanted food to address the emotional need. It didn't want the physicality of food. I know this might be a little bit tricky to understand, but the experience to me, to experience it myself, made perfect sense. I'm no longer addicted to food physically, but there is an emotional side of things that has an addiction there. This last week, I flew away into the mountains with no cell service and no Wi-Fi, and I attended a retreat for the purpose of mental health and self-care. There are a few things that I think are specifically relevant to a carnivore journey that I learned during this retreat, and I hope you find them helpful just as I am. I like to call them the 3 A's. What do we do when we are triggered? How do we move from a poor way of feeding our body, to a good way of feeding our body. How do we remain in that space? How are we consistent in that space? How do we do all of that while we're being triggered? And how do we move past those triggers so we don't keep being triggered? And this is where the 3 A's come in. The first A is acknowledgement. So we need to acknowledge what is going on around us, what is going on in us, what is actually happening. Acknowledge where we're at and what the issue is. Acknowledge the trigger. Why is it there? What is it pushing into us? What does this look like for me? Firstly, I need to acknowledge that I have had an addiction to food, but I am now past that addiction. Secondly, I need to acknowledge that I personally am dealing with some trauma. That trauma is bringing up lots of different emotions. I am being triggered constantly, and the way that I have known in the past to treat my emotions is through food. That addiction of addressing my emotions with food remains, even though the physical side of addiction is there. Acknowledging that is the first step to moving forward. That allows me to show myself compassion. It allows me to go, okay, this is what's happening right now. Where do I want to be? And it enables me to move there. Without acknowledging this, I can't move forward. It's like an alcoholic. If they don't acknowledge that they have an issue with alcohol, they are going to remain drinking and they aren't going to move out of that space. They first need to acknowledge that they have an issue so that they're then able to take steps in addressing that. The second A is attentiveness. Now, some people like to call this mindfulness. For me, I've worked out I don't really like that word. My mind often feels really full, which can sometimes be overwhelming. So to use the word mindfulness for me made my mind feel even more full and more overwhelmed. I actually really like the word attentive or attentiveness. This means that we're being attentive to what is going on in us in the present moment and what is going on around us. It means not being stuck in the past and not being stuck in a future, which actually most of the time doesn't even happen the way that we're picturing it in our mind. It means being present and being attentive to the present moment. It means showing ourselves grace, kindness, compassion, and this leads specifically into self-care. And there are 4 areas of self-care. There is physical, emotional, social, and spiritual. I don't know about you, but I have heard a lot about how important it is to self-care. Someone asked me recently, in fact on this retreat specifically, what I thought self-care was. I said, getting a manicure. And they're like, that's great. Then they said to me, picture self-care, picture these 4 categories: physical, emotional, social, and spiritual as 4 glasses. Here is a glass, well, a bottle really, and you can see that it's approximately half full with water. So what we want you to do, or what I want you to do, what I'm doing for myself, is if I'm not feeling so great, especially mentally, I'm looking at my 4 glasses of self-care. Physical, emotional, social, and spiritual. A mental picture. And I'm having a look at which one is full to the brim, which one is empty, which one is in the middle somewhere. Now, my physical, my emotional, and my social, they might all be completely full to the brim. My spiritual could be a little bit lower. This helps me to identify which of those 4 areas of self-care I need to address. So if it's spiritual, for example, it could be a good idea to go to church. Maybe you read a Bible, maybe pray. Doing something spiritual is going to bring up that level in your spiritual glass of water. But if your spiritual glass of water is low and it needs to be risen, and you go out and get a manicure or you hang out with a friend, that isn't going to help the level of your spiritual glass of water. But on the other hand, if your social glass of water is low, hanging out with your friend who brings you life, who brings you energy, that is going to top up your social glass of water. For me, the physical and the emotional are very similar. Physical would be food and movement, appearance. So things like, what are you feeding your body, including what liquids are you feeding your body? How are you moving? Maybe it's a gym, maybe it's a dance class. And your appearance. Do you need to perhaps put makeup on that day? What about a hairstyle? Do you need to go to a hairdresser? Do you need to get your nails done? What clothes are you dressing yourself with? The emotional side also for me is really similar to the physical. Some of the things are interchangeable. Food, for example, will affect your emotions. So on the emotional, do you need to perhaps feed yourself something different? Art is also something else for the emotion. Do you need to do some coloring or some painting or build something? Again, When movement is part of the emotional, especially with trauma, our bodies keep the score. They hold on to trauma and stress, and so through movement, we're able to release that out. And another one for the emotional is singing. Even if we aren't the greatest of singers, singing is a fantastic release of our emotions. On the social side of self-care, are we interacting with people? Now, if you're an introvert, that doesn't mean you don't need social. It doesn't mean you don't need connection with people. It means that you get your energy from taking moments with yourself. That could be 5 minutes in a restroom. It could be an evening at home. It could be a hike on your own, on a weekend. But you still need physical human interaction. Even as an introvert, you could get that from being at a friend's 30th birthday party with a group of 60 people. But you also could get that from a one-on-one interaction with a friend. And that's the same as an extrovert. You get your energy from being around people. That can be a one-on-one time with someone, or it could be in a group of 50 people. And spiritual, we already touched on. Do you have a faith? What is your faith? How can you interact with that faith? Is it by going to church? Is it through prayer? Can you combine the social and the spiritual through having a faith conversation with somebody? Also, counseling may be appropriate in the self-care space. That is something to also consider. What has self-care looked like for me, and what will it look like moving forward? Honestly, my self-care has been really haphazard. There have been so many times where I felt so drained and I've realized I needed self-care. So I decided I would stay home and watch a movie that evening. What I now recognize is that I was giving self-care to the wrong glass of water, when in actual fact, instead of addressing a physical need by resting, I should have been addressing a social need by meeting up with a friend. That is something that's changing for me moving forward. When I take a moment to address self-care, I'm going to do this proactively and not reactively. I'm not going to wait until I'm not feeling great and I'm feeling drained to address my self-care. Each day, I'm going to take a moment to assess my 4 glasses of self-care: physical, emotional, social, and spiritual. I'm going to assess if any of those are low. And if they are, I'm going to look at which one is low. And then that is going to help me identify where I need to focus self-care and help me identify what self-care I'm going to do. That's what it looks like for me moving forward. The next A is aspiration, and that completes the 3 A's: acknowledgement, attentiveness, and aspiration. What is aspiration? It's an active word for aspire. We are aspiring to something. What do we want the future to look like? What do we want our life to look like? And then going after that. In the carnivore space, that looks like we want to eat animal only. We want to fuel our bodies with sources of animal products, edible and maybe drinkable. Obviously, we need to drink water, and most of us probably aren't going to drink animal blood, but we would drink bone broth. Using a vision board is a really great way to go about doing this. In a moment, I'll insert a picture of a vision board I have done for Carnivore. What is a vision board? A vision board is basically a poster with visual images and sayings on it. In the carnivore space, you might put up your favorite steak. Mine's a ribeye, so I might have a picture of a ribeye cut out from a magazine or printed out from a computer. You might have your favorite types of seafood. Mine are shrimp, Moreton Bay bugs, oysters, mussels, and salmon roe. You might put as many different types of animal products on this vision board as you can come up with, so that when you're having a bored moment with the food and are tempted to move away from carnivore, you can look at that vision board and go, oh yeah, there's that cut of meat I completely forgot about. That'd be really nice for dinner. You can organize that. So just to run through these again, in the context of carnivore, when we are triggered to deviate from carnivore, and remember, we're eating carnivore because we have a specific goal in mind. We're not just doing this randomly. We want to stay focused on our goals. So when we are triggered, we need to acknowledge that trigger, acknowledge what we are doing. We need to be attentive to what is going on in that present moment. And then we need to remember our aspiration. What are we aspiring to? And we need to put that in our focus. This is a really quick and a really small snapshot of what the 3 A's look like. I would encourage you to jump on Google and look at strategies in these areas. What does it look like with acknowledgement? Attentiveness is often called mindfulness. So what are some mindful activities that you can do? And also look up aspiration. Vision board is only one part of aspiration. There are so many different aspects to acknowledgement, attentiveness, and aspiration, and I've only listed a few. I wanted to keep this short for you. So please jump online and do some research to help you move forward towards your goals that you've set for yourself so that you can be successful in reaching them. I want to add in here, before I move on and before I end this episode, there are 2 techniques that I'm finding really helpful. One is grounding and one is coping. When we're triggered, it's really important to ground ourselves. When you're acknowledging, oh, I'm triggered to eat this food, it's important to ground yourself. One of those grounding techniques that I really like to use is our 5 senses. And it's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Name 5 things that you can see around you. For example, my shirt, my necklace, my lipstick, my hair color, and the picture painting behind me. Name 4 things that we can hear. My voice talking. I can hear the humming of cars outside. I can occasionally hear the jangling of the dog as he runs back and forth outside my bedroom door. And I can hear my breathing. What are 3 things that I can feel? I can feel the ring on my finger. I can feel the arm of the chair. And I can feel the pillow behind me. Or I can feel the cool breeze. What are 2 things that I can smell? I can smell my lip gloss. And I can smell my cup of tea that I have on my side table. What is 1 thing that I can taste? I can taste the steak that I ate only shortly before filming this. So that is a grounding technique, and that can help bring ourselves back. So when we've acknowledged we're triggered, it can help bring ourselves back into a moment where we can be attentive to what is going on around us, and we can use that to help us make wise decisions by remembering aspiration and what we want our lives to look like and heading in that direction. What is a coping skill? A coping skill is something that we use once we're grounded to help us cope with the fact that we're triggered and to help us move past the trigger and keep focused on our goals. Coping could be breathing. So a really good example of a breathing technique is that we breathe through our nose for the count of 4. We hold it for 2 and we breathe out through our mouth for the count of 6. The important thing with the breathing technique is that the breathing out through our mouth is a longer count than the breathing in through our nose. We don't want to use the breathing when we are triggered. That's when we want to use the grounding. We want to bring ourselves back to be able to be present, to be able to be attentive, and then that's when we use the coping, when we're not triggered. We use the coping to help us remain focused on the aspirations that we have set. I hope you found the 3 A's, the self-care, the grounding, and the coping information as helpful as I have, if not more. That's my heart, is that you would find these things more helpful than I have. Please comment below any thoughts that you have surrounding today's episode, and to follow along with what this looks like for me moving forward and what it could look like for you. Please like this video, use the thumbs up down below, subscribe to my channel, select the bell to be one of the first to be notified of my future uploads, and then go on over to Instagram and follow me there, because that's where I give daily snippets. My Instagram is thatcarnivorelife.gram. Thank you for joining me today for this episode that's a little bit different and a little bit less focused on meat. But please remember, the reason why I'm eating carnivore is to help with my mental health, for starters, amongst other things. And a huge way that we can help our mental health is to stop eating sugar and carbohydrates, because carbohydrates are sugars, and start eating and continue eating and increase the amount of food that we are eating that brings health to our body. And meat animal products are the best way, in my opinion, of doing that. And that's why I eat carnivore and why I would encourage people dealing with similar health issues to eat carnivore also. Thank you again for joining me today at That Carnivore Life. Bye, and I'll see you next time.